This is Black Mental Health Matters. I'm drkerryann Williams. I'm a psychiatrist practicing in Massachusetts. And this is a podcast about everything related to mental wellness in the Black community and beyond. So today we're going to hear from another student at William James College in Massachusetts. And she's going to be speaking today about how educators can lean into the importance of empathy in their work and in their personal worlds. So I'm going to add her to the podcast now. So Kendall is a school counselor currently working at the elementary school level, but supporting learners from pre-K through high school. She's passionate about creating equitable, inclusive spaces where every student feels connected, capable, and truly seen. Angel has a degree in psychology and a master's in counseling with a certification in school counseling, and she's currently pursuing a doctorate in organizational leadership and psychology at William James College with an emphasis in African and Caribbean mental health. So welcome to the show, Angel.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So today we're talking about the role of empathy for educators. What prompted the focus on this area? Are there current issues with empathic weaknesses in the classroom?
I have been having a lot of conversation and also observations of emotional labor and compassion fatigue. I think it's that time of the year as well, too. But there have been a lot. I think teachers are feeling very stretched thin. I think educators are feeling stretched thin. So a lot of this is from my personal observation of what I'm seeing physically from teachers, and also, too, when I step into the space of students in the classroom and multiple different educators coming in, what's happening with emotional regulation for not only the students, but the staff members as well.
Okay. So why don't we start off with just talking about what is empathy? So we are kind of all on the same page.
Right. So empathy, I think, is the understanding of how to connect with someone else's emotions and understanding that. We quintessentially always hear about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. But I think the big piece of that is not taking on the emotions of someone else, but more so connecting with them and having an understanding of their emotions.
Okay. So what would that look like in a classroom or a teaching space?
So I think that looks like coming from a place of inquiry. I think it looks like inquiry, a wonderment, having the ability to say, I wonder what's happening with the student for today versus what are you doing? And more a lot of inquiry. So, for example, if there is something that a student is doing and it normally would be punitive, taking a step back, taking a moment to take a deep breath, although you're used to it being punitive, asking the question to yourself, why might this behavior be happening? And also having empathy for the student in that moment.
Wow, I like that, because you're not just looking at what the student is doing, you're wondering what they're experiencing. Mm-hmm. That could be leading to what they're doing, which is so much more powerful.
Absolutely.
And so this idea of having empathy and understanding empathy, is this something that's just innate? The educators, people just either have it or they don't have it, or is it a practice that educators can be trained in or taught?
I think everyone has some of it. I think there's a little bit more in others, hence of why we go into certain fields. The school counselor, I think I might have a little bit more than someone that perhaps, for example, may or may not go into a sales profession, right? So I think it's something that can be taught. I think it's a skill set. I think it's something that you have to work at as well. So if you want to be really, really good at something, it's something that you're constantly have to work at, especially if you're coming in, you're like, I have empathy, but I don't quite understand how that works in my area of practice. What can I do to leverage this experience, or what can I do to get better at it?
All right. So then there's a difference between having empathy and knowing how to use it in the
correct
space.
Correct.
Somewhat as an intervention.
Right.
And so what is the effect of using this as an intervention or a technique? Does this impact teaching practices? Does it impact outcomes?
Absolutely. I think the first part is modeling it. What does it look like for yourself? So a big component of why I also looked at this and how this came up is, what does empathy look like for self? So if I'm modeling to a student about what emotional regulation looks like, am I truly doing that am I truly modeling what that looks like? So I think that when having self-empathy, you are understanding what's happening within yourself, and also doing that from a place where you're not feeling guilty about it. You're not passing judgment within yourself. So if I can say to a student, you know what, I'm feeling very overwhelmed. Ms. Kendall needs to take a moment because I'm not regulated. And then what does that look like for me? And then modeling that And then saying to a student, remember 10 minutes ago when you came in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Remember, Miss Kendall said she wasn't feeling very regulated. I need you to do the same thing. Because even if you didn't have the conversation, you've been modeling that behavior for them. And not only for your students, but also for the staff members that are around you as well, too.
So I can see how this really does become something that the teacher or the educator has to be aware of.
Right.
Because not only are they experiencing it, but then they have to be so aware of it that they know that they have to model it.
Correct.
But also to be aware of it enough to say, I need to actually step back right now and take a moment to regulate myself, because that takes so much awareness as well.
Right. There is a big component of having a lot of self-awareness. I think that can also be something that is taught over time too. When we're in a space where you're constantly, there's a constant withdrawal from you. I'm constantly looking at someone else, like, are you doing this? Do you need help? Do you need assistance? You're not looking at yourself. You're constantly doing outward. So if it's a withdrawal from you, where's your own deposit? So if you don't know how to deposit within yourself, or you don't know how to take deposits in from the outside world, that's something that you're going to have to work at. There is a level of self-awareness that you do have to have, and also being honest with yourself about that and being honest with your emotional vocabulary. Maybe you have mad, sad, angry, happy, joy. Maybe you don't have the other things to really recognize what it feels like for you to be overwhelmed, what it feels like for you to be frustrated, what it feels like for you to be anxious or nervous. Maybe you don't have that vocabulary, and that's okay. And that's just something that you have to work on.
Are there existing curriculums that address this? Is this something that would be a novel, kind of a new curriculum that you would like to see?
I've seen it within, social emotional learning is a thing that we've been talking about the last couple of years within education. So there is a component that has empathy. I haven't seen it just empathy as a standalone. I'm sure there is, but it's not something that I don't think is often readily researched or often personally discussed. I think it's encompassing some other things too.
Okay. And that makes sense. And I guess as educators may also receive some training potentially in working with students who have disruptive behaviors, for example, like children. They may get some education in how to work with those students, but it seems like this additional layer of being kind of self-aware of their own emotions is really important.
So that is a training that we often have. Like, what does it look like to manage behaviors in your classroom at a very basic level? You will have that, but what does it look like to have empathy for a student that has often stages of emotional or emotional dysregulation? So you have those trainings about, like, what are effective practices in your classroom? What are interventions? What are some things that you can add into your tool belt? So we have those, but what does that look like to turn inward? And I don't think we're having that level of conversation.
Are there any kind of negatives to this, any downsides to focusing on empathy or using it as an intervention in the classroom? Anything to be aware of?
I think you have to be very aware of compassion fatigue, and you'll often be burnt out. Like I said before, there's a lot of withdrawals from you, and you have to be very keen on a lot of things are coming at you very quickly. You're assessing a lot of different things. You're pouring outward a lot. How are you managing and making sure that you're pouring back into yourself? So I can see burnout and compassion fatigue being definitely one of the things that is the negative side of having strong or high empathy or high emotional intelligence in regarding that.
The experience that you've had as an educator, working with your colleagues, being part of professional development days, things like that. I imagine that there may be some educators out there that don't really believe that this needs to be focused on. This doesn't need to be an area that we focus on. And so what would you say to, colleagues like that?
I can see that occurring. I would ask them, what is their personal definition of empathy? So I can kind of gauge where they are with the metric of it. And then asking, can they give me an example? I'm one that uses metaphors and observations a lot versus the literal definition. I would ask them to give me an example of empathy and what does that look like? And then building off of that example and how does that show up in their personal life, and then transitioning that, and then how would that show up in the classroom? There's a lot of things that we're doing with students. It starts with rapport building. So before you can come in and teach about ELA or math or science or whatever that looks like, are you building a foundation of rapport with the student? They're human beings at the end of the day. So they want to understand that this is a place where I can feel like belonging, have high psychological safety, And I trust that this is a space that you will constantly be the continual person that I'm going to see constantly, and not a revolving door of different educators. I think that comes into play a lot too. So if an educator is a little leery about, oh, this is this new thing that's being put on my plate again, and this will be gone in a few years. Like, no, this is something that is a practice that will only help you within your classroom, but also your relationships with people in general. Yeah.
Yeah, because I can imagine some folks might say, I don't have any problems with empathy. I don't need any training on this, but maybe kind of not be able to see the larger context of that it's not just about being empathetic. It's also about how you use that as a technique.
And like I said, the biggest piece that I think about is having empathy. And there's a difference between empathy and self-compassion. So if you say, I don't need this, I have a lot of empathy for my students, I have a lot of empathy for my spouse, I have these things, like, what does empathy look like for you? I think most people will be kind of stumped in that because that's not a conversation that we're having. And I can navigate that conversation with them from that.
Would it be possible for you to share maybe just like a hypothetical case example of what that could look like? Let's say, I had a child in school and they're 8 years old, and you've told the class to sit down and they need to start doing their work, and this child is not listening. They're not into it. What would a teacher taking an empathic approach, what might they do differently than just saying sit down?
And I want to be clear about having empathy doesn't mean a student doesn't have a consequence, right? So there are rules. There's rules in society. There are rules in the classroom. If you're 8 years old, you're probably in first or second grade. So you are one teacher for, let's just say, specific to my district, you're probably have, let's just say, even 25 students in your classroom. So you're like, Carryann, can you please sit down? The student is bopping around, someone else is listening, and students are always observing. They're going to see, is Carryann following the rules? Is she sitting down? Because if she's not, then I'm not, right? So you're like, Carryann, I need you to sit down. All right. I say friend a lot. So friend, I need you to have I need you to have a seat. Now, I can tell for me, something has happened within me emotionally. I'm getting frustrated. Name that, own that. Carryann, Miss Kendall is getting very frustrated. Can you please have a seat? And or friend, what is happening that you don't want to sit down? Because at the end of the day, what do I really want from the student? Do I want them to sit down or do I want them to engage in the lesson? What do I really, really want from them? If it's more so about engaging the lesson, you want to stand right there or do you want to sit down? Now I'm giving you a choice. You know what the rules are. The rules are to be in your seat. What do I really want from you? I want you to engage into the lesson. That's fine. You can stand there and engage in the lesson. And then moving on. I'm going to go, there are 25 other students. Carryann, I've addressed you, what the expectation is. Moving on, I'm going to go to the other 24 students. More than likely, over some time, they're probably going to come back to their seat and or engage in what you want them to engage in. Yeah.
So it sounds like that also includes a certain amount of flexibility.
Yes.
Because if you're rigid and you're like, you have to be seated in order for us to continue this lesson, then you're going to end up in this power struggle.
Right.
But if you're focusing on the goal, which is, you're engaging in the lesson, you're just choosing not to sit. And eventually, when I stop paying attention to that behavior, it's not going to be rewarding anymore. You'll eventually go sit down. That is also a part of it.
Absolutely. And that is an intervention where we're ignoring a behavior that we don't like or a behavior that's not appropriate for the classroom environment. That is an intervention that's taught very early. It does require a lot of flexibility. I think that comes with time, especially if you're coming from a place of, I want this, this is my classroom. This is not our classroom. I'm the adult in the space. You are a child. You're making a hierarchy. So you're always going to feel like you have to do it my way or the highway. Which to your point, you will get in a power struggle with a 7 or 8 year old. And I don't know if anyone's ever been in a power struggle with a 7 or 8 year old or a 5 or 6 year old. I think everyone's going to have big emotions by the time that power struggle is over. So at the end of the day, recognizing what is it that I really want from the student. And sometimes you just have to take a win how you can get a win.
It sounds like this should be a part of a curriculum from the time people are being trained in school. Then even after they have already finished training and they're, working and maybe just having additional continuing education, that is something should continue to be discussed.
I think, or at least in my training, I'm coming from a counseling background, so everything is all the feels and all the emotions and how are you managing that. So if you're on the other side of it and you're coming in about how do I teach this math curriculum, you're not really talking about feelings. You're talking about managing the classroom. Different instruction practices for different students. So what does that look like over time? Because the students that are in front of us are not the students that were in front of us 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I think students are coming into the classrooms with an immense amount of stress, especially after COVID. So what does that look like? How are you managing that? And we are asking more from educators, and that is contributing to a lot of educators really feeling stretched thin because I'm managing emotions. I may or may not, probably not, have been taught to how to do that, or I've had one course in undergrad about the psychological safety of the classroom. I'm making that would be a great class. I would teach it. But you may or may not really know how to deal with big emotions. And if you have a quick conversation or a hour and a half training, and then you go back and you're trying to practice that in real time, that's going to take a lot. And it's going to take some, again, I'm going back to self-compassion, or self-empathy. You're going to run that conversation back. Like, I probably could have. But again, what I want people to understand is self-empathy for yourself is without judgment. You can recall that conversation and you could have done it differently. You will have the opportunity to do it again.
Wow. And, as you mentioned, you said something about, let's say, for example, like math class, it may seem as though it's just about working on the curriculum and there's no emotion. And it's so interesting because I feel like there are so many kids that have like math related learning disorders. And even if they don't, math can be a difficult subject. Even if they don't have a learning disorder, it can be a difficult subject. And so there are actually sometimes more behaviors that can occur in a math class, more disruptive behaviors, because when students, of course, they're not following, they sometimes start to act out. And so I think might actually even be more important sometimes for teachers who teach classes like that to really be in touch with managing the empathy, the kind of the reason behind the behavior, and learning how to manage that. Even though their subject matter is so logical, they may end up with students that have difficulty with the subject matter, and so may have behaviors in response depending on the type of classroom that they're working with. And so, yeah, I think you're right. It's across the board, no matter what subject area, it may seem more or less relevant, but I think all educators really need to be in touch with this.
That was a really good point. So thank you for that. I think when I talk about empathy and I talk about connectivity and understanding your students. So I don't know for you, I've had several adults say to me, I'm not good at math, but you're a wonderful baker. You have to be good at math to be a wonderful baker, So I think it's having the connectivity and the rapport building and the understanding of your student. A student says, I'm just not good at math. To your point, a behavior may begin to manifest because I'm going to shut down because I'm not good at this. But if you understand and you're connected to that student, if that student plays sports are all about angles and math. If that student is, learning how to count, or maybe they have a younger sibling and they're teaching their younger sibling how to count, that's math. So you just have to leverage and use your rapport building with that student. So I think students are think about in terms of things in absolutes, black or white. I'm good at math. I'm not good at math. I'm good at science. I'm not good at science. So breaking that down as well too, to say you are good at this. It's going to take some practice. Did you wake up yesterday and know how to tie your shoe? No, it took some practice. Same thing that you have to do in here. So I think it's a lot of connectivity and understanding where the student is, and then bridging that gap too.
Yeah, and this is kind of making me think about so much, because I think if we look back and think about the teachers that we had that we really love the most, empathy is in there somewhere. Mm-hmm. There's something about that teacher that you can say, gosh, this teacher, they got me.
Right.
Or they were so friendly with us, or they were so flexible, they allowed this or that, and they kind of just understood when we needed a little bit more than that day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times those teachers that have the extra edge, that do the best, that mm-hmm. connect with students, it's because they're really leveraging their empathic skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And coaches do that very well.
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
yes.
I think that's why coaches have such a high influence, that of course they can be really tough, depending on the sport, but they are able to kind of, as you mentioned, just break it down, use metaphor, kind of, they're able to, talk to kids in a way that they understand and they just get them.
And I think there's a thing about meeting you where you are and can still have a high expectation. You will meet this, but let me help you meet this as well too. So having empathy is not being in a space where it's care bear all the time. I'm a hugger, but you can be a classroom teacher and I want to be keen about saying educators because I'm a school counselor, I'm not a teacher, and there are a multitude of different variety of people with a ton of different job responsibility and job titles that are in education. So I want to make sure I'm saying educator. You may or may not be a hugger, like that's my thing, but you can still have empathy for your students and they can still know that that you care about them. And at the end of the day, that's going to make them want to come to school. A big part of my role is attendance. If you don't feel like there's a sense of belonging or my teacher doesn't like me, I'm not coming to school. It matters.
No, thank you for bringing up this really important topic. I wanted to ask if you had any additional thoughts to share, anything I didn't ask you about?
I think my wish would be for people to really practice it for themselves. The work that we do is hard, and acknowledging that and no judgment upon yourself. And really, it is hard work. It's especially hard. I'm on Eastern Standard Time. It's dark at 5 o'clock. You're coming into the building, it may or may not be dark. You're leaving, it may or may not be dark. A lack of sunshine, like all the things that you're taking in. Just have some empathy for yourself.
No, that's beautiful. I think, just having empathy for yourself, redefining what success and failure look like, and so now towards the end of a show, I always like to ask guests to share 5 things that they do for their own mental wellness. And so what are 5 things that you can share with our listeners that you do for yourself?
I am from Pittsburgh. However, I'm a huge Boston Celtics fan. So one thing I will say out of the 5 things, I go to as many Celtics games as I can. And I am a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan with our football team. So I try to go to as many games as I can within my schedule. I love to sleep in. For me, that's a big thing. And I work full time and I'm a doctoral student. Sleeping is a luxury often some days. So when I can sleep in and I can sleep past 9 o'clock or just lounging in my bed, it's one of my favorite things to do. That was 2. 3, I love, for me, a good mani-pedi. I know a lot of people probably say like self-care is health and, getting my hair done. But for me, a mani-pedi, I truly enjoy that massage chair when you're getting your pedicure. I take full advantage of it. I will have my headphones and calming music and I do all the things. Making sure I am cultivating joy with my friends and my family members and trying to at least once a day or a few times a week having a really hearty, joyful laugh. I need that in my space. Working out, a big part of my everyday. So I love strength training. So I do genuinely enjoy lifting weights. In the days that I can't do the gym, I actually bought a walking pad. So when I'm listening to a lecture or I am in a class and we're having a live class and I know that it's going to be 45 minutes or an hour, I will walk on my walking pad it's not uncommon to see me in class walking with that walking pad. So those are my things that, how I practice like self-care for myself. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. I like those are really great ideas.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining me today for today's episode. And I want to say thank you to the listeners. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. You've been listening to Black Mental Health Matters. I hope you have a great week. Take care.